Rich boy selling crack, niggas wanna check, shit tight, no snack, just bought a Cadillac. Throw some D's on that bitch, just bought a Cadillac. Throw some D's on that bitch, just bought a Cadillac. Rich boy selling crack, niggas wanna check, shit tight, no snack, just bought a Cadillac. Throw some D's on that bitch, just bought a Cadillac. Throw some D's on that bitch, just bought a Cadillac. Rich boy selling crack, niggas wanna check, shit tight, no snack, just bought a Cadillac. Took it to the top at the damn top drop. Two color flip flop and the red lollipop. I was in the pocket that I still got my Glock cock. New money, motherfucker. Don't you see the big dot? Don't you see the big chain? Don't you see the big rims? Wonder who they hating on lately, baby. This hill. And the blank got his skin seats. Got me Dundee. Hoping you hood. I'm the one that you wanna be. Haters wish they could feel the hood in my 83. Ride with no tint, so the motherfucker know it's me. Rich boy, selling crack, niggas wanna check, shit tight, no snack, just bought a Cadillac. Throw some D's on that bitch, just bought a Cadillac. Throw some D's on that bitch, just bought a Cadillac. Rich boy, selling crack, niggas wanna check, shit tight, no snack, just bought a Cadillac. Throw some D's on that bitch, just bought a Cadillac. Throw some D's on that bitch, just bought a Cadillac.
I'm your host, Gino Boost from GameMusicForAll.com, and you're listening to the 1/100th episode of the SUBCON podcast, a podcast about video games and hip-hop about video games. I'm kicking off this special anniversary with a track from the very same album I began the very first SUBCON with. You just heard Far Away From Home, Rich Boy, by Froskees from Final Fantasy V Remixed. I started this podcast shortly after discovering Froskees, Andre Martel, and Shadowrunners. So using Froskees, the opening episode, which was also a tribute to Final Fantasy, and including a track from his fantastic Final Fantasy V mashup album, was a clear and obvious choice. I've been bumping any new Froskees beats and mixes I come across, but haven't had a chance to return to this album until now. Hopefully it won't be another 50 episodes before I include another track from this classic, because all the tracks on this album are classics. I had listed in my notes that I need to do like a bit of a retrospective to celebrate this minor achievement of 50 episodes, because I have like zero stick-to-itiveness. But then I realized those episodes are pretty bad. What's happening right now ain't Shakespeare. But come on, I have notes when I record now. I even wear this fancy suit when I record the show now. Makes me feel all important. So talk to me in like another 50 episodes, because I think this is the episode where it kind of like gets better. It'll get better after that. Maybe I'll finally have a guest or two on by then too. It'll be pretty awesome. Like I mentioned at the top of every episode, it's all about video games and these awesome underground hip-hop tracks that are also about video games. It's not complicated, though it is also kinda complicated. I didn't exactly choose the most marketable podcast concept possible. Wallowing in obscurity is a personal choice though, and you can't judge me for it. I'm glad you are listening though, listener. I hope there are a few more of you after another 50 episodes. But for now, let's talk about Final Fantasy VII. I already wrote an article about Final Fantasy VII, which you should read. But now the maw of the beast has been opened, and out like 100 shrieking ghouls come my numerous thoughts and opinions about Final Fantasy VII. I know I put in over 100 hours in Final Fantasy VII, though an exact estimate is impossible, thanks to a few mitigating issues. First, the clock stops at like 99 hours. Why even include a fucking timer then? Yes, the timer is what I'm salty about. Square and most other RPGs learned from this travesty at least. and include a time log of hundreds, even thousands of hours. Now that's progress. The most mitigating factor was all me though. I MacGyvered together a DualShock controller, a rubber band, along with a ton of counter materia, and one constantly attacking giant snake. There were many nights where I would go to sleep while Cloud and company, but mostly Cloud and all his counter materia, continued to fight the same giant snake over and over again in some endless nightmare. I want to talk about the debug room for Final Fantasy VII for a minute. Thanks to the now defunct GameShark cheat tool, Final Fantasy VII was the first game in which I played a debug menu with endless video game discussion, emulators, and tons of incredibly inquisitive nerds. Many debug menus have been uncovered in classic RPGs at this point, but back in the days of video game magazines that came once a month and VHS tapes that you rented from a VHS tape rental store, this stuff seemed like arcane knowledge. It honestly felt like being backstage with the performers after a big Broadway performance. Everyone is just standing around, chilling out. You can visit any set from the game or unlock any item or magic skill as if they were just props. And of course, trying to fumble your way through a bunch of Japanese options menus is a reward all in itself. I probably still have all my charts that try to explain all of the options from all of the people you could speak to. I played Final Fantasy VII a few years after it came out, and I used a FAQ, which is an FAQ, which is frequently asked questions when I played the game. It's called the BTB FAQ. It's actually still up on the Final Fantasy VII boards over at GameFAQs. At the time, I chose it because it was the FAQ with the largest file size, so it most certainly had to be the most in-depth, and I felt assured that I would not miss a thing about Final Fantasy VII this playthrough. The reason the file size was so damn large compared to other Final Fantasy VII guides, though, was that this dude decided to add a comical running commentary about the ridiculousness of Final Fantasy VII. Considering I just wrote my own comedy article about Final Fantasy VII, I think this FAQ had an odd and early influence on my writing style. This BTB, making jokes about video games, he was onto something. And we have to talk about the Final Fantasy VII music too, I guess. I guess we talk about video game music sometimes. Honestly though, there are a ton of brilliant tracks from this game. There are 99 problems with Final Fantasy VII, but the soundtrack ain't one. So let's list off my top 3 favorite soundtrack. So let's list off my top 3 favorite themes. So here is my top 3 favorite tracks from the Final Fantasy VII soundtrack. Number 3, Ares theme. I didn't get the chance to play Final Fantasy VII as soon as it came out, so by the time I got around to it, I had long knew of Ares' death. You won't get no sentimentality out of me about that. This is a really damn good theme though. It's equal parts uplifting and mournful, just like those flowers that Cloud crushed when he fell on them. What a jerk. Number 2, Those Who Fight Further. I love Final Fantasy battle themes so damn much. Get me so pumped. I'm never more excited to take turns than when I hear some angry Nobu Uematsu brand fight music. You know what? I'm just gonna go listen to Clash on the Big Bridge for 20 minutes. Number 1, Cosmo Canyon. In a world of magical and mechanical bullshit, this plodding, drum-driven track leaves a lasting impression in my mind. Even though it comes up early in this very, very lengthy game, it was probably one of the most impactful songs simply because it was so different from the rest. It's also a really good track to remix, as featured in a previous SUBCON episode. Well, I think that's enough Final Fantasy opinions. At least I'll shut up until the game's 25th anniversary. Let's get into another throwback to the very first episode of SUBCON. Make sure you check the show notes because you have no idea how much you need this full album. Head over to gamemusicforall.com/subcon. This is the Kanye X Katamari Damacy mashup, Can't Tell Me Anything, by Team Teamwork from Katamari.mc.
A dream I could buy. Yeah, where I came from. I guess I should have forget where I came from. Excuse me, was you saying something? You can't tell me nothing. What you got?
We are back, and you just heard this epic remix of The Weeknd, Starboy, BeatmakerKelz remix by BeatmakerKelz. I couldn't get too deep into the season without the latest BeatmakerKelz beats, but make sure you check the show notes and check out Kelz on his SoundCloud and Bandcamp pages. I'm just coming off the endlessly addictive gameplay of Pokemon Moon, and we finally got a US release date for Story of Seasons Trio of Towns. I've been playing Rune Factory 4 for over 3 years at this point. Still haven't finished the game though. I never finish games. But I did get married just last year in the game. So, you know, living life. It's time to get back into Bokujo Monogatari proper though. We've come a long way since I became obsessed with the fun and simplistic goals of the SNES original. Crops, farm animals, marriage. It's all been there and ridiculously addictive since the beginning. The series has taken a lot of twists, turns, spin-offs, and breakups since then. But I think this is a great one to jump back in with. Will this be the game to pull me back to Story of Seasons over Rune Factory? Rune Factory 4 is really fun and has so many things to level up that it actually gets very ridiculous and surreal sometimes. Expect my thoughts soon. If this game is addictive enough, it might not be too tough to wait out the Switch launch until Mario Kart 8 Deluxe drops, as is the current plan. I'll catch that second wave of Switch shipments. Probably. As I mentioned last episode, I'm doing some of everything these days. Videos on YouTube, this and other podcasts, comedy articles, album reviews. If you enjoy one or several of these things, presumably the podcast, then consider subscribing on Patreon. Head over to patreon.com/GenoBoost and have a personal say in future content on Game Music for All as well as this podcast. Be sure to check out the latest video on YouTube, which is my review of the recent SoCal Retro Game Expo. It's a watchable video. I'm talking about retro games and VGM, specifically the epic metal concert that took place at this event. Make sure to check out my latest comedy article for February, which is an article either about Dodonpachi or Contra 3. As of this recording, I haven't actually decided yet. And if you haven't, make sure to check out the Bad Buffalo mixtape featuring some of my favorite RPG-based music from Season 2 of the SUBCON podcast. Just head over to gamemusicforall.com/badbuffalomix or search for Bad Buffalo Mix on YouTube or SoundCloud to stream that amazing 10 minutes of mashups and chiptunes and VGM and Hip Hop. And make sure you listen to my Twitch stream, which will be going on this Friday, the 24th. Join me as I play some game or something, probably. I don't know. I haven't decided which game yet. That's probably bad, right? Because that means I'm going to suck and no one's going to watch. Oh, right. It's going to happen either way. Tune in. Some of the latest albums I talked about since the last podcast. Make sure you check out Nerdcore Absolution Volume 3 by Geek E Inc. Productions. I talked about Sin, the latest album by Night of the Round. I also talked about the new Nintendo-based beat tape Nintendo by Doughboy the producer, and the wonderful grunge throwback music of Yes Mayhem and their latest album Molly. Now let's get into all the background music for this week's episode. To kick things off, we heard Interlude and Credits by Team Teamwork from selected video game-based instrumentals. That was followed up by another one by Team Teamwork from the same album. This time we heard Barrett, and those two tracks were followed up by one more Final Fantasy VII remix, this time by the wonderful group Missing No, and their album Warp Zone is their track Ares Theme. So make sure you head over to their Bandcamp page and check out that album. As always, you could find links to all the songs I play on every episode of the SUBCON podcast over in the show notes. Just head over to gamemusicforall.com/subcon. That batch of FF7 was followed up by some Donkey Kong Country 2. That was Forest Interlude Remix by CRW, another one from his classic video game remixes album. And after the break, we heard another one from that album, this time a remix of Song of Healing, a track from the N64 game Majora's Mask. And that was followed up by Don't Even Think About Dying by Salazar, which is a remix of that same track from Breath of Fire 2. And to wrap things up, we're hearing the track Carefree by Sublime Cloud. And to close out this week's episode, we'll be hearing the ending theme from the original Harvest Moon for the Super Nintendo, composed by Tsuyoshi Tanaka. But before we get into that, it's not a celebration if we don't invite 2 Mello to the party. Let's close things out with one of Mello's latest mashups that's up on his SoundCloud page. Check the show notes, of course, for links to this track and all the other music on this week's episode. If there's anything better than 2 Mello, it's 2 Mello's Nas mashups. Thanks again for listening to the SUBCON podcast. This track is Thief's Territory by 2 Mello.
Check 1 2 1 2. Who got more style than Sundu? Check 1 2. Yo, I'm hot like 95 Fahrenheit on a summer night, tight spot where bodies rot. Rats straight from water drops in the streets, niggas. Little kids scared cops with red dots. Philosophical gangster with violent priors. Going back like black and white TVs with pliers. Leaning on broke down cars with flat tires. Flash iron on anybody trying on the blocks I'm supplying on. Mighty cone, my peeps top balloons up and swallow them in the P-now. Got goons, lots of them. Cops see them and run, don't want no drama. Certain parts of the streets the beast don't want a martyr. Hood haunted like a Dakota, where John Lennon was shot up. But he sang for peace, he banged for freedom. Hang with wild Jamaicans from Kingston who drink Irish Moss. Listening to Peter Winston McIntosh. Lightning hits the top of the church steeple when I'm writing. Semi-automatic, no hyphen, it's frightening. The thief's theme, play me a night, they won't act right. Understandable smooth shit that murderers move with. The thief's theme, play me a night, they won't act right. Understandable smooth shit that murderers move with. The thief's theme, play me a night, they won't act right. Understandable smooth shit that murderers move with. The thief's theme, play me a night, they won't act right. Understandable smooth shit that murderers move with. I take summers off cause I love winter beef. Started 87 with the shotty and the sheep. 3/4 length beige, dressed to kill, bust a shell at the ground. Pellets hit the crowd, nobody like a snitch. Everybody shut their mouth. Woolrich, Carhartt, gunpowder stains. Smelling like trees, sesame on the brain. Scheming on your girl's bamboos on your chain. Got ill up on the train. Twisting off a cap of the English in my vein. Might have pushed you on the tracks. Deaf crack fiends who can't speak scream noises. Cause she bought a drum of soap from one of my boys. It's just another day in the hood. And I'm with some wild brothers up to no good. We saw the movies like Tony Montana and them. But our style was lit gunpowder and we robbing them. Money dudes make them come up out their shoes. Run their Jews, word is bones. While my man Nino gone. And I had to make a song speaking on my old life for the thieves who come out at night. The thief's theme, play me a night, they won't act right. Understandable smooth shit that murderers move with. The thief's theme, play me a night, they won't act right. Understandable smooth shit that murderers move with. The thief's theme, play me a night, they won't act right. Understandable smooth shit that murderers move with. The thief's theme, play me a night, they won't act right. Understandable smooth shit that murderers move with. 1, 2. Check 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. 1, 2. Check 1, 2, 1, 2. Who got more style than Sundu?
Thanks for listening to the SUBCON podcast. Please support the show by subscribing to me at patreon.com/GenoBoost. Find song links and show notes at gamemusicforall.com/SUBCON. Follow me on Twitter at GenoBoost and Instagram at RetroBitsLA. And of course, you can find the latest video game-based albums at gamemusicforall.com. You're now leaving SUBCON.